Queen Soraya didn't lose her crown because she did something scandalous. She didn't get caught cheating. She didn't get executed. She didn't start a war. She lost everything because of one thing that wasn't even a choice: a doctor's verdict. And the moment that word hit the palace walls, love stopped being romantic and started being administrative. Because in a royal family, you're not a wife first, you're a function. And Soraya's function had one job: produce an heir. Now, here's where the story gets cruel. Even after they divorced her, even after she was replaced, even after she tried to build a second life, the Shah and Soraya never stopped loving each other. And years later, when he was dying, she wrote him a letter. It was supposed to be closure. Instead, it became the darkest almost in her entire life. Because they never got to meet again. And that's the pattern with Soraya. Every time she reaches for happiness, something snaps shut right at the last second. Soraya wasn't born into the kind of life that prepares you for a normal marriage. She was born into a life that prepares you to be watched. She was the daughter of an Iranian nobleman and a German mother, raised between worlds, between languages, between cultures that never fully agreed on what she should be. And people love to frame that as glamorous, but raised everywhere usually means belonging nowhere. Even as a teenager, Soraya had a reputation: blunt, sharp-tongued, quick temper, not the soft, obedient doll a royal court usually prefers. But she had something else, and that's what made the palace look twice. She photographed like a myth, and myths are exactly what monarchies sell. In the late 1940s, Iran's loyal family was hunting for a new queen. The Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, had already been married once. That marriage ended, and the message from the palace was clear. The next wife needed to be more than beautiful. She needed to be useful. She needed to fit the image, and she needed to deliver what every royal system demands eventually: a son. This is where it gets quietly creepy. Soraya didn't get discovered like a movie star. She got evaluated. A photo is seen, a decision is considered, a meeting is arranged, and suddenly, a teenage girl is invited into the orbit of one of the most powerful men in the country. Not for love, for selection. When Soraya met the Shah, it hit her like a fairy tale. He's older, polished, military, royal. He looks like destiny walked into the room wearing medals. And Soraya, still basically a teenager, gets swept up instantly. She later described the moment like she'd been struck. But here's the first hook in the story. Soraya wasn't just falling in love with a man, she was falling in love with an escape route. Because being queen meant the one thing she never fully had in her nomadic upbringing: a fixed identity, one name, one place, one purpose. And the Shah loved that she was different. He loved her European edge, her beauty, her presence. He was obsessed fast. So fast that within months, the machine started moving toward marriage. And once that machine moves, it doesn't really care if the person inside it is ready. The palace scheduled the wedding. The world prepared for a royal spectacle. And then Soraya got violently ill. This part always gets told like it's romantic, but it's also a warning sign. Because the wedding wasn't postponed because Soraya needed time. It was postponed because her body physically couldn't stand up. And still, the palace only delayed it briefly. Because in a monarchy, the clock is always ticking. Ticking toward heirs, ticking toward stability, ticking toward the next crisis. The wedding was eventually set again, and Soraya walked into it like a girl stepping into a costume that would take years to peel off. The wedding itself became legend, designed by Christian Dior, the kind of dress that turns a person into a symbol. But symbols have weight, and Soraya reportedly had to endure it while still recovering, still weak, still far too young to be playing the role of national mother. Here's the brutal irony. Even at her wedding, Soraya's body was treated like a prop. If she could stand, she could perform. If she could perform, the palace could proceed. And if the palace could proceed, Iran could keep believing in the fantasy. That's how royal love works. It's real until it gets inconvenient. At first, they really were in love, and that's what makes the story hurt more. Soraya and the Shah weren't a cold political pairing with zero emotion. They had passion, they had chemistry, they had moments of sweetness that felt genuine. But then, palace life kicks in. The rules, the expectations, the watchers, and Soraya started showing the side of her personality that the code didn't want to deal with. She wasn't trained to be quiet. She wasn't built to smile through disrespect. And she didn't know how to pretend she enjoyed being managed by strangers. So she fought, sometimes privately, sometimes publicly. And every time she did, the palace filed it away as evidence. Evidence that she wasn't right. Not right for their culture, not right for their crown, not right for the image. The court nicknamed her that German woman. Let that sink in. Even though she was Iranian royalty, even though she was queen, even though she was the Shah's wife, the palace still reduced her to her foreignness. That's what courts do. They don't just judge you, they label you. And once you're labeled, everything you do gets filtered through that label. If you're charming, you're manipulative. If you're angry, you're unstable. If you're independent, you're disrespectful. And Soraya's independence wasn't subtle. She disliked royal customs. She hated boring duties. She didn't want to play decorative puppet for people who secretly despised her. The problem is, she was married into a system that runs on obedience, and Soraya wasn't obedient. Then came the photos. The scandal that sounds ridiculous today, but wasn't ridiculous then. Soraya in the 1950s, in a bikini, water skiing in America. That image traveled faster than any palace apology could. And suddenly, Soraya wasn't just a queen, she was a problem. To conservative officials, she represented moral decay. To palace insiders, she represented embarrassment. To the Shah's family, she represented danger. And in royal families, danger gets handled one way. You remove it. But there was still one reason they couldn't remove her yet. Not until they knew one thing. Could she deliver an heir? This is where the love story turns into a medical thriller. Years passed. No pregnancy. And in a monarchy, no pregnancy isn't a private disappointment. It's a national emergency. The palace pushed her into tests, treatments, appointments, not for her health, for the dynasty. And Soraya felt it. That suffocating sense that her worth had been reduced to one body function. Now imagine the pressure. You're a young woman, isolated in a hostile court, and the whole country is waiting to see if you can produce a male baby. That kind of pressure doesn't just stress a marriage, it poisons it. Because every affectionate moment becomes transactional. Every month without a pregnancy becomes a silent accusation. Eventually, doctors told Soraya what the palace feared most. She likely could not have children. And with that, the entire marriage shifted. Because the Shah could love Soraya, but the crown needed a son. And crowns do not negotiate with romance. The Shah tried to find a way out, not out of love, but out of the problem. And one of the solutions floated was the most brutal kind of compromise a woman can be offered. He could take a second wife, a second queen, a second womb. Soraya rejected it. Hard, jealous, proud, furious. And honestly, can you blame her? Imagine being told, "We love you. We just need someone else to do the part you can't." That's not love. That's employment with a smiling face. Soraya wanted the Shah to choose her over the system. But the Shah was married to the system before he ever met her. That's why he was Shah. And that's why Soraya's fairy tale had an expiry date. The palace pressure tightened. The Shah's mother pushed for divorce. The court whispered. The political situation outside the palace was unstable. And instability makes royals panic. Because when people start questioning your right to rule, the only thing you have left is the illusion of strength. And strength in their eyes meant continuity. Continuity meant an heir. So Soraya, the beloved queen, became the obstacle. And then it happened. The divorce announcement. public, official, cold. Soraya later claimed it blindsided her, that she wasn't even there when the machine finalized her removal. And the Shah, in public, looked devastated. He wept. That's the tragedy. You can tell he loved her, but love wasn't the highest authority in that marriage. Politics was. Soraya lost her title, but the Shah didn't just discard her with nothing. He gave her gifts, money, a luxurious life in Europe. And on paper, it looks generous. But here's what those gifts really were: a quiet settlement, a way to keep her close enough to control the narrative and far enough to keep the throne safe. Because royal families don't just end relationships, they manage fallout. And Soraya didn't fade into obscurity, she did the opposite. She tried to rebuild herself into something no palace could touch: a celebrity, a woman with her own name outside of the crown. She lived in Paris, moved in high society, carried that sad-eyed princess mystique that the world loves. And the world ate it up. Because people don't just love happy royals, they love broken royals. They love a woman who looks like she walked out of a palace with a shattered heart and a perfect eyeliner. But Soraya wasn't done bleeding yet. Because almost immediately, the palace replaced her. The Shah remained, and the new queen, Faradiba, gave birth quickly. A son. The thing Soraya couldn't deliver. Imagine watching that headline. Imagine seeing the world celebrate the new queen's fertility like it's a victory. Imagine realizing your marriage didn't end because love died. It ended because your body didn't perform. That's not a breakup. That's being fired from a role. And Soraya had to watch the world applaud her replacement. So she ran toward a second life. Films, fame. If royalty made her a prisoner, celebrity might make her free. And for a moment, it worked. Soraya landed roles, got attention, became the exotic former queen turned actress. But the film industry has its own palace politics, and Soraya brought her biggest weakness with her. She loved intensely. She attached deeply. She didn't know how to love halfway. And then she met a man who became her second great love, Franco Indovina. Brilliant, charismatic, complicated. And just like the Shah, there were complications around him too. Because Soraya kept repeating the same emotional pattern. She fell for men who came with locked doors, men she couldn't fully claim, men who kept love in the shadows. Because for Soraya, love and secrecy had become the same thing. Then fate hit her again. Indovina died in a plane crash, and Soraya collapsed into grief. This is the part people skip. They talk about her as a glamorous divorcee, a tragic princess, a fashion icon. But at this point, she wasn't an icon. She was a woman who'd lost her country, her crown, her first love, and now her second love. And she did what a lot of broken people do when life keeps humiliating them. She disappeared, retreated into her apartment, into her small circle, into quiet survival. Years passed. The Shah's reign eventually collapsed. Revolution, exile, illness. And then Soraya heard the news. The Shah was dying. Cancer. The powerful man who once ruled a nation was now reduced to a body failing in private. And it did something to Soraya. It cracked open everything she'd kept sealed for decades. So she wrote him a letter. A love letter, really. Not a public statement, not a memoir chapter, a private reach across time. She told him she had never stopped loving him, and she asked to see him one last time. And the Shah, according to accounts, wrote back with the same truth. He still loved her too. They planned to meet, secretly, quietly, like the entire love story had always been forced to exist, behind closed doors, away from the public myth. And then the final cruelty landed. They never met. He died before it could happen. The last almost of Soraya's life. Even goodbye got stolen. After the Shah's death, Soraya lived in the shadow of a romance the world romanticized, and she privately mourned. People compared it to Romeo and Juliet, but Romeo and Juliet died young. Soraya had to live. She had to keep waking up and carrying a lifetime of what if. What if she could have had children? What if the palace had chosen love over dynasty? What if she'd been allowed to be a wife instead of a womb? And here's the darkest part. None of those questions ever get answered because monarchy doesn't apologize, history doesn't refund pain, and the palace never admits it used you. Soraya's final years were quiet. Paris, high society around her. A beautiful life from the outside, but from the inside, it was loneliness with good furniture. And then one day, she was found dead in her apartment. And the details were unclear. Not cinematic, not dramatic, just silence. And if that wasn't eerie enough, tragedy followed again. Her brother died shortly afterward. People whispered, speculated, tried to force a mystery where maybe there was only exhaustion. But that's what happens when someone spends their life as a symbol. Even their death gets turned into a story the world wants to own. Queen Soraya's story isn't just a princess who lost her crown. It's what happens when a woman is allowed until she becomes inconvenient. It's what happens when your marriage is judged by your biology. It's what happens when the world calls you a fairy tale, where the palace treats you like a contract. Soraya was adored, photographed, celebrated, and still, she was replaceable. Not because she wasn't beautiful, not because she wasn't loyal, not because she didn't love him, because she couldn't give him a son. And that's the real horror behind the glamour. The crown doesn't care how much you love. It only cares what you produce. If you want more stories of the fairy tale is the bait and the real tragedy is what happens behind palace doors, subscribe. Because history doesn't just create queens, it creates women who learn to lose quietly.